So back in March of 2002, I was doing my best every day as a project manager. But I had this nagging feeling Scrum was going to be big, and I wanted to be part of it. So I asked my manager, Larry, if the company would sponsor me for a Scrum Master training. But Larry said, Scrum is a fad. We don't have it in our budget. I walked out of his office feeling disappointed. But I kept thinking about Scrum and Agile. I wanted a better, more human way of working, and Scrum felt like that. I just felt this pull in my gut. So because of that, I saved up my own money for several months, then paid for the 3-day training with my own money. And voila, certified Scrum Master. Back at work on Monday, I felt excited. Now I'll be able to be a Scrum Master, I thought. There was only one problem. My job was still a project management job, not a Scrum Master job. What to do? So I decided to take a risk, a small one. I started looking for ways to start practicing Scrum inside my current job. I thought, okay, what's important to people? The answer was obvious, the project and how it was doing. So I put each piece of the project plan onto a sticky note, then put them up on the wall in the hallway in a backlog list, and then in 4 columns: to do, doing, blocked, and done. Then I started holding project meetings as stand-ups in the hall, looking at the stickies. We moved them around for adjustments people needed. But you might ask, what about risks? You gotta track risks in project management and in Agile. You're right. So I found some red stickies and wrote my project risks on there. Then posted those in the hall next to our columns. As it turns out, people really liked that because it made it so much easier to see and manage risks. Even Larry. Relief. But most important, I started listening to people versus telling them what to do. After all, soft skills are hard power. And that was really the biggest shift for me, moving from command and control to servant leadership. It was embarrassing and humbling to see how much more effective I became. The morning after that realization, I looked around the office and realized that the 8 people on our project team sat in 8 different corners of the office. So the next Scrum Master activity I decided to try was to invite the team to sit together. I knew Larry would object unless he was in on it, so I talked with him first. He said, I'm not a fan, but if the team can stay as productive as they are today, and maybe even get more productive, then I'm open to it. I felt annoyed and not liking the fact that I felt like a child asking for permission, but that's the way that culture was structured. So choose your battles, as they say. I chose not to choose the battle of taking on hierarchy. Instead, I tried to use the hierarchy to support me learning Scrum activities, if that makes sense. So that afternoon at our 1 p.m. project status meeting, I said, hi everyone. As you might have heard, a lot of teams are moving in the direction of Agile. And one of the things they do is sit together to make it easier to collaborate. Developer Dan immediately looked uncomfortable. He said, I'm an introvert. I don't want to be distracted. I felt a little worried, but I said, I get it. I'm an introvert as well, which is true. Sitting together doesn't mean there's conversations going all day to distract people. In fact, what if we create a team agreement that any conversations that are not a meeting need to go into that little conference room over there with the door closed? How do people feel about that? Dan looked relieved. The rest of the team did too. They were probably introverts. He said, I'd feel comfortable about that as long as we treat it as an experiment where we have the freedom to go back to our old sitting pattern if we decide it didn't work. I exhaled. That seems fair. Let's call it the quiet room, I said. And how about if we do a retrospective next Friday for 15 minutes where we ask each other, what are we doing that's working well that we'd like to continue doing? and what's not working that we should stop doing, and what would be good to start doing. Inside my head, I was feeling deliciously sneaky because I just figured out ways to practice actual Scrum mastering jobs like creating a team agreement, aka social contract, leading the retrospective, designing and executing agile experiments, and raising collaboration levels, as well as the focus on individuals and interactions over process and tools by having people sit together. But I held my breath again, wondering what Dan's response would be. He looked thoughtful. Then he smiled and said, "I usually like to argue with people, but I do like the idea of a retrospective because it seems like it would allow us the freedom and flexibility to change our minds." I let out my breath in relief and hoped nobody noticed. I said, "Exactly. We can adjust and adapt as we go." Feeling encouraged, I spent a weekend working on a PowerPoint presentation to try to convince Larry to take the entire division agile. I felt kind of excited to show it to him on Monday, but it turned out to be much, much too soon. He said, "I still think agile's a fad. There's not enough data out there to show us it's a viable option." What I didn't know at the time is that there actually was enough data. I just didn't know it existed or where to find it. But more importantly, to you as an aspiring Scrum Master, know that he had a normal human brain response to anything new. He rejected it, and that's a normal response. The brain rejects anything new and treats it like a threat to survival until proven otherwise. It's called the negativity bias. So because of that, I realized I needed to slow down and not ask Larry to boil the ocean, so to speak. I went back to trying very small pieces of Agile, more and more over time. I learned to be careful to even sometimes avoid calling it Agile or Scrum, to avoid people's allergic reaction to anything new. And I changed my approach from asking for permission to asking for forgiveness. Luckily, I really had to ask for forgiveness because I went slowly. I added very small pieces of Scrum mastering little by little, a couple times per week, versus slamming everybody with 20 new things that would be way too much for them to take in. Flying under the radar, so to speak, but in ways that actually helped the project. Now it's your turn. Take a good look at your current job. Then pick one or two small Scrum mastering techniques to try. Quietly, non-disruptively. Some ways to start might include making a backlog and Kanban board for your to-dos. Then just move the cards across the board each day. You can do it either by yourself or with a couple of colleagues. Start small. Another way to get started is to hold an informal retrospective for whatever you and your colleagues are working on. At first, don't even call it a retrospective. They'll fight you. Instead, just casually ask retrospective questions the way I did. And here's a people-focused way to get you started. Look around your current workplace for anyone demonstrating any of the Scrum values, which are commitment, courage, focus, openness, or respect. Go out of your way to thank them. Practice gratitude. That builds trust and respect, which are two foundational pieces of Agile. Doing this is practicing Scrum mastering because it's practicing Agile leadership, growing others, Agile by example, and building trust. Another good way to build your experience is to become a Scrum nerd like my apprentice Paloma. Read, listen to podcasts, attend meetups, and don't forget to add all the experiences that you build up to your resume and LinkedIn profile. And now, congratulate yourself. You're building your experience at the same time as becoming more effective at your current job. So the goal of this sprint was for you to learn concrete ways you can build Scrum Master experience in your current job. By now, you have a concrete approach to build your Scrum Master experience in your current job. Good job, Scrum Masters. You can do this.